Let's look at today's conversation. We are looking at, the attack being launched by the rebel group in Yemen, in the Red Sea. You are aware of why this group is launching this kind of attack. But let's set a background for our viewers to understand what is playing out. Give us a background to the reason fueling this kind of conflict, the parties involved, and then the vested interest as well.
Yeah, let's look at the background from 2000, a rebel group from the northern part of Yemen who were struggling to have representation and voice in the government of the Yemeni government, were suppressed by the Yemen government in power at that time. And their leader, Houthi, was killed by that government. And then, of course, this generated a whole lot of resistance from his followers and supporters who had put themselves together into a group to fight against the Yemeni government. And then, of course, the Middle Eastern power, led by Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, all put their energy together to see how to suppress this issue. And that was in 2005. And succeeded in ameliorating those kind of crises. But you know, when you're fighting asymmetrical wars, where you don't have human beings face to face, this war is difficult to fight. So these people have shifted away from where gunboats are, and they're operating outside of the shore. So these men have found themselves in the heart of the Red Sea, and now becoming a terror to the globe. And don't also forget that the international power play that's ongoing, and Iran has also been very critical in that interplay of terrorist groups in the Middle East. Here you see these people, they call themselves true representative of Allah. So here, getting some support from Iran, like every other terrorist group within that space, and then unleashing this terror we're seeing on the Red Sea, which of course will have a very huge impact on the global supply chain management.
Okay, the Houthis consider Israel as an enemy, and following the Israel-Gaza war, they have been attacking, or they claim that they will attack any ship that is going to Israel or Israeli operated. But from what has been happening over time, they've been attacking even those not connected to Israel. So what has been the reason for that?
Now you should understand, the friend of my enemy is my enemy. And the friend of my friend is my friend. So this is psychology in international diplomacy. Now the target is actually not just Israel alone, it's also America, who is a strong ally of Israel and a strong ally of Saudi Arabia. So it's not just Israel in picture. So because all the politics around Israel is even because they're getting the backing of the United States. So when you're attacking Israel, you're actually attacking the United States. So when you're attacking Saudi Arabia, you're attacking United States of America. And that's why you find that America is pretty interested in what's happening here. And this is the real reason why this conversation with China is ongoing. Because once you fall out from America, you fall into the other side. Because like I've said here sincerely, the attempt to build a multipolar world has failed. And so we are going back to the bipolar arrangement, where you have one axis here and this other axis here. So people are aligning with America, another aligning with now China, because Russia is being ostracized. So the major force here is Russia, China, and who is not with America certainly will be with China. So the two forces are the one at play.
All right, let's expand this conversation further by looking at the rules of some of these countries. You have US, you have Russia, you have Iran, and you also have the group itself. But But let's start with Iran. What do you think is the vested interest here? Because it's of public knowledge that this group is being sponsored by Iran. And then when it comes to the issue of weapons and ammunition, they are supplying the rebel group. What do you think is the interest here, the vested interest? Let's look at Iran before we go to other countries.
Yeah, but I think for Iran, if you have listened to Netanyahu speaks about the axis of evil, which of course is headquartered in Iran, is the fact that the Iranian government is also not happy with the injustices that's playing out in the middle of the East. Like they say, injustice anywhere become a threat to justice everywhere. So when you have a system, a global system, that is not favoring everybody at the same pace, where you're seeing the wanton exploitation by one forces over the other, and you are seeing the inequities, inequalities in terms of wealth. Some people are taking the resources from here and they are becoming richer and richer. Why poverty is, So this attempt to balance world power is what is at the center of terrorism. Because the psychology of the terrorist is the fact that you have taken everything that belongs to us and you have made us poor, and therefore we will use everything we have to ensure we grind you. So the psychology of terrorism is what is playing out. And unfortunately, Iran has been an advocate for renegade in the recent time.
All right, so let's look at the implication of this on global trade. Now, the Suez Canal is where about 15% of global seaborne trade passes. And this has been under attack for a while now. What implication will that have on global trade?
Yeah, huge implications, because if the ships are not coming, of course, supplies are not moving. And if supplies are not moving, of course, you're going to see gluts. Those who are producing cannot sell, and those who are buying cannot receive. So you have a very dire consequences. And this, of course, is going to affect flight prices globally. And you're going to see skyrocketing prices, which of course we're already experiencing in both household items, industrial goods, because you can't move through that pass. And there, of course, people are also afraid to move so that they will not be attacked. All these things is all going to spiral the inflation rate. And then, of course, in some places, it will be the deflation rate.
Now, let's look at the role of China in all this. You're aware that China is a strategic partner to Iran because of the oil and all that. Now, U.S. is trying to make a kind of diplomatic pressure on China to prevail on Iran. They had a meeting yesterday. The nationals of both countries had a meeting to see how they can pressurize China to prevail on Iran. Do you see this being a major development to this kind of this kind of crisis?
Well, I don't see the U.S. approach to resolving this issue making any significant impact, because, you see, in the time past, in international politics, you see, American is the international policeman of the whole world, because they have all the weapons with them, they have all the power, they have all the money, and they can tell you, sit down, you sit down, they say, move, you move. The world has since moved past that space, and I think the United States of America need to understand this, that the need for mutual respect for one another is much more important in today's diplomatic relationship than this war kind of approach to say, oh, if you don't do, I sanction you, which has been the approach of American diplomatic interplay with China. You can't bust China now because, number one, China has come of age. In terms of resources, economic power they have, military power now they have. So you can't just ask them to do X against their own national interest. So this mutual respect of one nation for the other is quite important if we will ever get world peace. And this is important. America needs to respect China. And there are a whole lot of areas where this has to play out. You take, for example, China has been asking for permanent representation in the United Nations because you find that Taiwan has been representing China. A little tiny island we're supposed to be. And this is why you see China is also threatening to annex Taiwan, which doesn't make a sense. So we must get to that point where we have to pursue peace with everybody who is involved, because we see that China is going to value its trade with Iran much more than any diplomatic row with the United States of America. So if you're not buying from us, we must look for market elsewhere. And that's what Chinese government has been doing in recent time. So America must recognize the fact that China has come of age, that they are not just pushover anymore. They must respect China and respect even other smaller countries in the world. And the president of America can't sit down in Washington, D.C., White House, and be ordering people around across the globe. He would need to leave White House to go meet some people and have this conversation. And I think Donald Trump succeeded in doing this during his time, where he had to even travel to North Korea to have a conversation. You see, this mutual respect is what is going to guarantee global peace at the end of the day.
Talking about guarantee global peace, the way it is right now, with even the US and UK responding to the attacks on the Red Sea by bombing, also fighting the Houthis, do you think there is a chance for peaceful negotiation, or has it gone beyond that?
You see, that's what I'm saying. Today, diplomacy cannot rely absolutely on the power of the gun. No. It will have to rely on the power of relationship building. Because the more you fight, the more you create trouble. Because don't forget, we just talked about the death of about 25 soldiers of the Americans in Jordan border with Syria. And that's huge for Americans to lose 25 soldiers there. Because whatever you are doing with Iran, don't forget that even the Syrian government is also opposed to this. And so you're having a whole lot of enemy within that Middle Eastern state who are also not supporting the American cause. So this is the problem. So when you say you want to bomb in the sea, the people go to another point. When you are bombing another point, you see, bombing cannot solve today's diplomatic trouble. What solves it is negotiation. People must come to the table. No matter how small you think they are economically or militarily, you need to sit down with them and let them understand that, look, these things that we're talking about, it's not about power. It's we need each other to succeed. That, for me, is the path to global peace, not war.
Now, let's look at the impact of this crisis on Africa. You're aware that the Red Sea, the activities taking place on the Red Sea, that connects Asia with Europe, then Africa. Now, what will be the impact of this kind of crisis on Africa, the economy, the logistics arrangement, and then what do you expect of African countries to start looking at in order to be able to manage this kind of crisis?
You see, Africa has been the whipping boy of the continents of the entire world, and that is quite unfortunate. We're looking forward to seeing an Africa who's grown up now, at least to be able to supply maybe up to 50–40% of what we use or consume. Because for most of African countries, we are still reliant on Asia and the Western powers for whatever we need, even including our food need. And this is, of course, going to be affected if the logistics is disturbed for a while. And then the already very poor African country become extremely poorer. So the implication for Africa is huge. And that is because Africa has not been able to actually put its house in order. And this is one of the issues that we keep saying, that we need a one Africa. Nkrumah started this advocacy in the late 50s, that Africa cannot survive as small countries. Africa can only survive as a one bloc. So he amplified the United States of Africa, which of course did really not see the light of the day because of the activities of these same superpowers, and whether they are from the East or from the West. So we couldn't really come together. And then after the death of Nkrumah, we saw that Muammar Gaddafi became another champion of African unity. Because we know for us to be able to actually take our place in the Committee of Nations, Africans need to play together as one. But the Western power has never allowed us to do this because we are tied to their apron string. And this is the problem Africans need to sit down to actually resolve and see how we can deal with, the secondary contradictions within Africa. And what are these secondary contradictions? Is access to power, where, of course, the zero-sum game politics of Africa need to change, where we need to share power, where we need to share resources with the minority so that we don't incite them to become anti-government. So this is where Africa need really to put its house in order so that when these shocks are happening, whether in the East or in the West, we are not adversely too affected.
Okay. Now, Africa may be trying their own bits to ensure that they are not too affected. And the world in itself, in response to this, is looking for an alternative route for trade. But will that be sustained? Is it going to be a safe route in the long term? How do you see this transforming global trade over time?
Well, I like I've said, and I think that for me is what it is. Whether you look for a new route, what would the new route cause? It will become a longer route. You have to pass through the Indian waters to find a way to get into Africa Atlantic Ocean. And then, of course, you see the cost of carrying your vessels become quite expensive. Of course, it will affect the price of whatever thing you are buying or selling in Africa. So that is what it is. So there's no how it will not affect global trade. That is why I'm emphasizing that what the pursue is peace. And how do we get peace? Peace is simple. It's democratize the United Nations and let those big people understand that even the smaller powers matters today. Because we don't know who has what anymore. Where, of course, you can say, okay, nuclear weapon is this place. People are doing stuff. And that's what Netanyahu has been pressuring, that Iran has arsenal right there inside there. And they've been tracking and using his map to look at where the things are in Iran. We don't even know what they have. And this is where the world needs to sit down and swallow those humble pie. And let's go around the table. And we're not just calling shots to other people. We should also respect their sovereignty and the right to be who they are. And even when we are going to take things from them, we should ensure that this thing for the mutual benefit of all. So what alternative do we have? Alternative will only reduce in higher prices. And that's where the world finds itself as of today.
All right, let's look at the business implication of all this. According to reports, oil price, according to reports released on Monday, oil price have jumped up by 1%. And this is expected because even the vessel in question, was laden with oil. But now let's look at the implication now for the whole world globally. And then for Africa, what should be the narrative for Africa looking inwards, knowing fully well that this might last for a while? So what should be the narrative for Africa now that the impact is affecting global logistics, is affecting oil business, and virtually every commercial activity taking place in that route? So what should be the narrative for Africa in terms of looking inwards to be able to mitigate the effect of this attack?
That's the point I made earlier on. Africa should not be reactionary to global issues. As these things are happening, they must be able to calculate what is their impact on them and then begin to negotiate for themselves. I expect that the African Union sit down now and to call an emergency meeting of heads of states to say, how do we deal with these issues? Because we will be the biggest loser. Our citizens are going to pay more if this situation persists. And see how they can also initiate diplomatic talks with some of these rebels to see how we can stop this operation. And let's sit down around table. And Africa can actually be a hub for negotiation. It doesn't need to be always from the West. We need to also take leadership in some of these things. So we need to see an Africa who sit down and call their Middle Eastern counterpart and say, let's deal with this issue because it's affecting us. So we're not just going to wait to see what America and China is going to do. African Union must be at the center. We want to see a delegation from AU going to Iran, not routing through China. So all these negotiation, diplomatic moves needs to be happening right now in Africa so that we don't allow the crisis to persist and then the people who are the wretched of the earth bearing the brunt.
At a time like this, do you see some businesses benefiting from it? Does it become an advantage for businesses in terms of creating substitutes?
Yeah, it will be if the technologies are there to create substitutes. There are few substitutes that you can create at the moment, which is, of course, a very big issue because refining power in Africa is low for petrol and diesel, which, of course, we still buy greatly from the West and from Asia. So these are issues. So where you have an alternative, great, you can take advantage of it. Gas still comes more from Russia and all these places to Africa. Now, Nigeria is trying to build the pipeline connecting Morocco to Spain. Now, if this project has been done earlier than now, of course, Nigeria should be smiling to the bank with a lot of opportunity if this thing is not coming from the West. So these are some of the things where we really need to be strategic in terms of thinking, looking at the way the world is today, how we should play in terms of positioning ourselves for global trouble. And Africa needs to take a lecture on this. And I mean African leaders.
I'm wondering in all this, what's the role of Russia? You know, what influence will Russia have or has on, this kind of crisis? And what could be the vested interest here as far as Russia is concerned?
Well, like I said to you, we are gradually gravitating towards a power front in politics today that whether we like it or not, yes, people can still talk about multilateralism, but I don't see that working anymore really because there's no small center power anywhere. So it's either you are here or there. So if you're not with the US, you must be with Russia, China. So that's where we are. So this is where the world has found itself again. And we are at the throes of a very difficult challenge. But I think nature has some of all these crises. And that's why you are seeing a whole lot of gluts in China also happening. And then, of course, they're also concerned about trade. Russia itself is having to cope with the NATO forces in its war against Ukraine. This is also affecting its economy real daily. So here, yes, it may not be anything good for anybody. This is not good for anybody. And I don't think there's such vested interest real here. But what also we must have to look at is what level of authority do these nationals have over these terrorists? Well, what else? You see, it's one thing for you to be able to say, okay, I supply you a weapon, and then we give you oil in return, or we give you something else that means that's where the relationship ends. But they cannot command you to say, go on war or stop war. Because the goals or the objective of this crisis may not be the same to either Russia or to Iran or those concerned from Yemen. So Yemen, this is the real issue here. So you have a world here where everybody has an interest to protect. And now, in those days, they call it in international relations, mutual assured destruction. That's the situation where we find ourselves, because if this thing persists, it's not just going to affect only China or America, it's also affecting Russia, because their grain cannot enter into Africa also. So I think they should also be very concerned about what is happening at the Red Sea, because their vessels will pass also. So this is where they to themselves are also worried, and they must also really be talking about it. But it's unfortunate that at the 12-hour meeting with between the U.S. officials and the Chinese officials, really for me, when you are serious about diplomatic issues, side of state should meet.
But this time around, the conclusion from that meeting is there's going to be a phone conversation between U.S. President and that of China. Do you think that will make any impact?
Well, phone conversation, I don't know what impact that can make. The phone conversation is different from table talk, where people sit down around table and I can be looking at your eyes and know what you are feeling and what you are thinking in your mind. So this is also very important. And this is the problem the world has found itself in recent time, when we're having only old men govern the global space. And this is quite not good. So because they can't travel, they can't move, the mobility is rigid. And this is why this is all having this space. If we'll have a younger president in America, I could take a flight the next day and say, okay, let me meet this guy up in China and say, look, what's the real issues? Let's talk about it. So take pride aside and then face the diplomatic issues. And then you can get real solution. Making telephone call will not stop the issue, really, for me. I think it should be much more than a telephone call. Since America is the one who is actually pursuing peace at the moment, and I think they should do it with every of the strength and energy they have to actually drive this process. Because it's not China. If China is the one that's actually the one that is trying to drive this process of negotiation, then of course, Pink should be in America to see the American president and sit down with him one-on-one and say, let's resolve these issues. But I think, you see, ego is a big problem here. And China is becoming egocentric, and of course, America has always been there on a high ego, and then they feel that they rule or own the entire world. But people are saying, no, that's not correct. So this is where, for me, that conversation needs to be elevated. It needs people to sit down, shake hands, and agree on something that is concrete, that both parties can take to the Congresses, and then they resolve the issues and they deal with it.
Do you see any connection with politics here? You know, the American election is near, is coming soon. And do you think how Joe Biden handles this crisis will have an influence on his rating?
Well, of course, there's no how. If it's going to have economic implications, definitely it will also have political implications. You see, if you manage your relationship with other people very well, it also affects how you look as rating in terms of your efficiency. And this is what it is. And people would now begin to remember themselves and say, oh, if it was the day of Donald Trump, this cannot happen. These are where Biden need to actually leverage his contact and connection with China to solve this problem. And if he's unable to use it, and it's a very low ebb here, it will continue to affect the way he's seen politically, whether it's a weakling or somebody who is inefficient when it comes to diplomatic relationships. So he needs to prove a point, and prove that point to the American voters, definitely. So if it's affecting economy, it will sure affect politics, and that's for sure. So, but it's not that people who are on the right are doing it because American election is close. No. The real truth of the matter is that they have been there. It's not today, it's not yesterday, it's not last year. They have been there even before he came. And it's just that by the way Trump has positioned America during his tenure in the 4 years was to say, American for America, we really don't care what's happening on the outside. So they were not putting eyes on what was happening in the international scene as much as it affects the American interest. So the places that Donald Trump will go to will be things that America can easily leverage on as it's affecting their trade or whatever interest that America hold in those spots. So he was not so much about being here or there, which of course is the hallmark of democratic governance. They want to see how every country in the world is doing, including looking at moral issues in countries. So Donald Trump wasn't really concerned about those issues while he was the president. But here you're seeing an American president who is interested in everything, everywhere. And then, of course, you're spreading your tentacle. And the debt burden on the American citizen is getting to the rooftop. put at last month at about every American citizen is owing about 102,000 US dollars in debt.
All right. So, if America is able to negotiate very well with Russia, with China at this time, and the attack at the Red Sea stops, what about the Middle East? Do you see that translating to peace in the Middle East? Is it just America that is fundamental to bringing peace, or even within the Middle East, there are issues within themselves that needs to be resolved?
Yeah, but you see, what America is trying to do with China is not really because China has the key to what is happening in the Red Sea. China doesn't have the key. Now, what America is thinking is that, look, if Iran is funding these people, and the greatest buyer of Iranian oil is China. Now, if China stops buying Iranian oil, then Iran will not have money to give to these people. Probably they will run out of fund, and then probably the trouble will end. So that is just a calculation. But who say Iran will not sell oil to other people? Who say India will not be ready to buy oil from Iran? Who says Russia will not be ready to buy oil from Iran? So these are the issues that, for me, that's making it really very complex. Because you're not having, as if that, you see, when you call the Chinese president will call the head of the Houthi rebels and say, okay, please stop, and they will stop. No, that possibility is remote. What is in here is, okay, help us put sanction on these people. So if you sanction them,
war.
Yeah, so that's, which is of course still war, and it makes it even more severe and dire. And we also have to look at the implication of that on the Chinese economy that is suffering a glut at the moment because of overcapacity. They have produced so much, and so much is lying down, is not being sold. I was reading the news this morning where, of course, I think in Switzerland, were complaining that they are going to be closing down their solar panel, even in Germany also, because they are looking at American Chinese coming to undersell their products in those regions. So the Chinese economy is also threatened. So China also is also very conscious of whatever that happens, so that at the end of the day, there will be a revolution even within China, because when people are hungry, only one thing is left. If you have nothing to live for, you can die for anything.